All right. Hey guys, how's it going? I want to talk a little bit about this Lord of the Rings on Amazon series that is coming out soon, that everybody's really excited about and not so excited about too. There's been a lot of people talking about this video, not only this video, about this whole show that's been coming out, about the pictures, and I'm sure you're all aware, most of the fans are pretty mad. This is the teaser trailer that aired during the Super Bowl, published on YouTube on February 13th. Look at this trailer here. We've got 105,000 likes and 154,000 dislikes, just edging it out there on the dislikes with that ratio. And if you look at the comment section here, notice that, look at all these comments. Evil is not capable of creating anything new. It can only distort and destroy what has been invented or made by the forces of good. Quote by J.R.R. Tolkien. And it's just this quote over and over again in different languages, which is so funny to me. A lot of these people are obviously just spamming it. Probably coming on here. This guy's coming on here like every day, multiple times a day. If we keep, but I mean, the fans are really bothered by this Amazon adaptation. And then also, as you come down here, we've got this one from Peter Jackson. As filmmakers, as writers, we have no interest whatsoever in putting our junk, our baggage into these movies. We just thought we shouldn't take what Tolkien cared about. We just thought we should take what Tolkien cared about. Clearly, we should take those and put it in the film. This should ultimately be Tolkien's film. It shouldn't be ours. Quote by Peter Jackson, which is a really good quote. I don't think Peter Jackson always abided by that quote in his making of the movies, but nonetheless, it's a good quote and it's a good spirit for if you want to do an adaptation. So obviously, these fans are not happy. Now, if you know anything about me, you know that I'm a Tolkien fan myself. I have read Lord of the Rings at least 5 times, along with The Hobbit. I've read The Silmarillion twice. I've read a lot of the other stuff that was compiled by Christopher Tolkien. I listen to Corey Olson, the Tolkien Professor's podcast, regularly. So, I mean, I live and breathe this world. I love Tolkien. I love his world. And I'll say, I just want to talk a little bit about what I see going on here. Why so many people are upset, but also kind of what my thoughts are on all this. So there's 3 things that most people are reacting to, and let's just go ahead and bring up this image here from Vanity Fair. This is really what it boils down to. 3 issues that I've heard most people talking about that I think most people are upset about. The first is this forced diversity into Tolkien's world. The second, if we scroll up, we'll see, is Warrior Galadriel. And the third, if we go back down here, is beardless female dwarves. There's other things a lot of people have been complaining about, and there's other things to be worried about for sure with the show, as with any adaptation maybe. But let me just address these 3 things. So first of all, this issue of forced diversity in Tolkien. Let's talk about race in Tolkien's world first. Middle-earth is a multi-racial society. The ethnicity or the color of hobbits and men is not always explicitly stated, but when you get to Gondor, and they talk about the Southrons coming up, and they talk about the Easterlings, the Southrons are described as having dark skin. Easterlings, they're described almost like in Mongol terms. They have like lots of facial hair, and maybe even like, I think they're called ruddy. I mean, they're clearly described like, you know, as different ethnicity from the normal people. They're not like white. And Tolkien created really the Lord of the Rings, you know, part of what inspired him to do that, as, you know, there's a really famous quote in one of his letters that he wanted to create an English mythology, whereas, you know, they had the Arthur literature, but all the best Arthur literature he thought was too French. Tolkien famously got frustrated with sort of the what would you call it, the Frankenization of a lot of things. He tended to avoid French words and preferred Anglo words, because he was just like that. But he wanted something that was distinctly English for his people, and that was a lot of the way. I mean, that's not to say that he wrote, you know, the Lord of the Rings as like an allegory of his people or anything, but he intended this to be an Anglo-Saxon story. So it makes sense that the characters would be Anglo-Saxon, at least the characters who are, in part of the main thing, at least part of the main characters and are, immersed in the main lands that story deals with. Okay, so all that going to say, Tolkien most likely envisioned all of his characters as being white, except for those who, came from other lands outside of the lands that he was primarily dealing with. So, are there black dwarves? There could be. And actually, I think it's really cool to explore the idea of some of these dwarves being from different races. We know about dwarves that there are 7 different houses of the dwarves. When they were created, there were 7 fathers, and those fathers all became 7 separate houses. I think it would be really cool to portray the 7 houses of the dwarves as being, different races and having different physical attributes. I think that'd be interesting. Are they going to do that with this? I don't know. To be honest, it looks like they're not. Let's look at this first picture over here. We've got Owen Arthur as Prince Durin IV. Now, he looks great. Love his beard. Love his armor here going on. We've seen in the Instagram post, as this loads up, he's got his warhammer here. This gold dust on his hands is really cool. I like his rings. Everything about this looks great to me. The runes on this warhammer, everything looks good. Coming back to this character, the dwarven princess Disa, standing at Khazad-dûm's entrance. Now, Durin is the head of the Longbeards. Okay, that's one house of the dwarves. Most of the dwarves that from The Hobbit that went with Bilbo, most of those were dwarves who were Longbeards. And they all were from Khazad-dûm. They all had their ancestry there, at least. So there were dwarves in Khazad-dûm that were not Longbeards. But the Longbeard, Khazad-dûm was Moria, if you don't know what Khazad-dûm is. That's basically the ancestral home of the Longbeards, primarily. So why do we have this person who's the king of the Longbeards, and this person who's a princess, presumably of the Longbeards, who's not of the same ethnicity? That's weird, okay? And it's not racist to say that. It would be weird if, you had some story about an African tribe, and one of the characters was a different tribe, even. We'd not even talk about color. It's a question of, being consistent. And part of the reason Tolkien's world is so appealing to me and to so many others is because it's internally consistent. It's a world that makes sense. It follows its own rules and everything fits together well. And to put in a character that is presumably related to this character over here when they're clearly not the same ethnicity is odd. Now, maybe this dwarven princess is going to be from a different house. Maybe she's going to be like she married into the Longbeards. Maybe there's some other situation going on here, and they're going to explain it that way. Well, if they do it that way, I don't really have a problem with it. But I really don't expect them to be that careful. To be honest, it feels like this is just a token black person being put in a dwarf role. And that doesn't make me look forward to it. Let's talk about this guy over here. This is Arondir, or Rondir, however you say that name. This is also a black character. He's a black elf, a sylvan elf. Now, when I first saw him in the portraits in Instagram, let's take a look at those. So we X out here. Where is his at? I skipped it. It's right here. So when I first saw this, I actually thought this guy was like a man, not an elf, and some kind of woodsman. He's got a very rough-looking hand. His armor is very rough-looking. It doesn't look to me like an elven kind of armor. But oh, that's the wrong page here. Let's go back this one. This is an elf character. I heard some people complaining about this armor. That some person I saw said it looked like a dead Ent. I wouldn't go that far. I think this is a really interesting design. I think maybe it'd be a better design for one of the woodmans who live in Mirkwood. It wouldn't be Mirkwood at this point in time. But that's kind of what this reminds me of. Does it work as a Sylvan elf? Yeah, I actually think it does. To explain the Sylvan elves, these are the same kind of elves that would have captured Bilbo and the dwarves in The Hobbit. They are good, but they're not particularly like noble, especially compared to elves like Galadriel and Elrond, because these elves never saw the land of Valinor. They never saw the two trees. They were never with the Valar. They stayed behind in Middle Earth, and they're a lesser people than those, and less noble and virtuous than those who went over and came back. So, I mean, does it make sense that this person would be a different ethnicity than the elves that we're used to seeing? Yeah, it's kind of weird that he's black. Especially kind of weird considering he's kind of in a dark elf scenario. So you're going to call the dark elves dark because they're less noble, but also because they're black. That's coming into bad territory there. We don't want to say that. But looking at this character too, a lot of people were complaining about the hair. I really don't care about the fact that he has long hair. I don't want a character who is ethnically African to have long hair. I don't want elves with afros. That would be weird. Is this? I don't think this breaks the show, but it is weird. It's not easy to get over because we all can guarantee you there's going to be other Sylvan elves and they're not going to be black, and that's weird. What I would like to see is an ethnically diverse cast that is consistent with the world that Tolkien made, and they could have done that. For instance, we know that the Númenóreans had dealings with the people to the south called the Haradrim, and we know that those people were black. Why can't we have some Haradrim characters who are allied with the Númenóreans, who are helping Elendil? Why can't we see something like that? I really think they if they worked hard, they could have done. There are ways they could have been diverse and made it consistent. Now, we don't know yet. We haven't seen the show yet. It's not going to come out till September. We've got several months to go, and who knows what we're going to find out till then. To sum it up, this doesn't break the show. This doesn't mean it's going to be bad. I mean, just look past it and try to enjoy the show for what it is. But it's not racist to want the creators to have something that's consistent with the world that Tolkien made. We would really just appreciate it if you'd take seriously his vision. Consistent with Tolkien. Now let's go up and look at Galadriel. A lot of people are not happy about this, which kind of surprises me because I actually really like this design. The armor is obviously a lot less showy than Peter Jackson's portrayal. I think a lot of the anger at Galadriel and her portrayal in this show is coming out of a desire to really see Peter Jackson's portrayal. They prefer Peter Jackson's version. They want this to be true to that. I would like to see a different kind of Galadriel than Peter Jackson's. I think Green Galadriel, as Corey Olsen calls her in The Hobbit, is just really stupid. That scene in The Fellowship of the Ring is kind of odd in the way they do that. I don't know how I would have portrayed it. I probably wouldn't have portrayed it that way, and I probably wouldn't have done it as well. But especially in The Hobbit, that was just really that was a weird interpretation of Galadriel. What do we know about Galadriel, and is this consistent with her? It's entirely consistent with Galadriel's character that she would be a fighter. Now, Galadriel is an extremely important elf amongst the elves who are in Middle Earth at the Second Age. Galadriel is the granddaughter of Finwë, who was one of the top elves. Her cousin was High King of the Noldor for some time. She is not able to become the High Queen because she's not from the right house. But she's basically nobility. And at this point in the Second Age, she's the oldest character around, other than Treebeard. Even as well, I take it back. Círdan is there, but I don't think we're going to see Círdan in this show. But she's certainly more noble than Círdan because she's gone to Valinor and come back. So Galadriel's a highly significant character even at this time. It makes sense she'd be taking part in battles. Commander of the Northern Armies. When I first read this, I did kind of raise an eyebrow at that. And the reason is because, as you may have heard if you're keeping track of this stuff, Galadriel has never taken part in any significant battle. Throughout the entire First Age, Galadriel was literally sitting in the Kingdom of Doriath, which was ruled by her uncle King Thingol, and she was married to Celeborn, and didn't do anything significant throughout the entire First Age. her brother Finrod founded Nargothrond. Her cousins, the Sons of Feanor, were off doing stuff. Her other cousins, Turgon, had Gondolin, and her other cousin, Fingon, was the High King of the Noldor for a time, and she was just hanging out in Doriath, not actually ruling over any piece of land. So, I mean, of all those cousins, she's certainly the least significant. But she's the only one that stays in Middle-earth, and perhaps that's because now she feels like it's her time to shine, her time to make a name for herself, because she hasn't done that in the First Age, despite living through pretty much every significant thing that happened in the First Age. Is she a captain of military? I mean, she's had a lot of chance to see it, but it seems like a weird point. So I understand why people don't like it. I don't know that I necessarily like it myself. I do like seeing her being in a role that is full of action, though. And I think that'll be interesting to see. I also really like her costume, and we got to take a look at this dagger. We have to talk about that before we move on. This dagger is awesome because, look at this. So it's not just this gold and silver that's mingled here. This is an image of Laurelin and Telperion. Okay, these are the two trees that are in Valinor that were destroyed very early in the First Age, and the light from these two trees is what went into the Silmarils, the jewels that the whole wars over the First Age were fought over, and also went into the flask that Galadriel gave to Frodo. The light from these two trees went into that flask, and Galadriel is the only character who's actually seen these trees, who's still in Middle-earth. So the fact that she has this dagger that's referencing that is really, really cool. I think that's awesome, and this is one of the things that makes me excited about the show, for sure. Let's see. The other thing I want to talk about, okay, beardless dwarves. And this is, I got to credit Corey Olsen with the Tolkien professor talking about this one, because he's read a lot more literature on this than me. The statement in the appendices of Return of the King that deals with, dwarf women having beards, whether or not. There's one statement in the appendices of the Return of the King that kind of addresses this, but not really. Most of you, I'm sure, are familiar with in the Two Towers. Gimli's talking to Eowyn and describing where dwarves come from. Do they come from holes in the ground? Because many people think there are no dwarf women. And the reason is because they're hard to be recognized because of the beards, as Aragorn says. Tolkien never explicitly stated that dwarf women had beards. What he says in the appendices of Return of the King is that when they do travel, which is rare, they are usually mistaken for dwarf men. Now, I don't know how you could be mistaken for a dwarf man without having a beard, because dwarves have very prominent beards. So I would tend to take from that yes, dwarf women have beards. Tolkien, in some of the other literature, which was edited and published by Christopher Tolkien, has said kind of both. He said they had beards, he said they didn't have beards. There's not really a straight answer on that. Corey Olsen has talked about that, and I think in the new book that was published recently, just a few months ago, The Nature of Middle-earth, that discusses this topic as well. And I don't remember what it said in that book, because I haven't actually read that. I just heard Corey Olsen talk about it. So the question of whether they had beards or not, it kind of goes both ways. I tend to assume they did. I think Tolkien envisioned them as having beards because that's what he put in the appendices. It's really not a big deal that this woman doesn't have a beard. I wish she did. I think it'd be cooler if she did. She doesn't. I think we're just going to have to get over that. So all in all, let's talk about these three things just as a summary. Is the show going to be bad? Is it going to be woke? Well, the casting seems to be woke, but we don't know yet. We haven't seen the show yet. What I have seen doesn't make me super optimistic. We also know that they hired an intimacy coordinator, which means we're likely to have some explicit sex scenes. I'm hoping that we don't get something that explicit, but I'm hoping that they don't take this in a Game of Thrones direction. We're not going to know until the show comes out. So, as things stand, let's just wait till the show comes out. We'll watch it then. We'll make our decisions then. I'm waiting with bated breath. Let's put it that way. I don't have high hopes for this show. We're going to have to approach this the same way we approached Peter Jackson's Hobbit films. The first two were really a disappointment for me. The third one wasn't a disappointment because I knew what to expect. And so with this, we got to just go in with low expectations. it's not wrong to be kind of frustrated at the forced diversity, because it does seem like it's just forced diversity and tokenism the way they're presenting it. Oh, all in those lines. Here's another one I wanted to talk about. This character up here, this I was really assuming was going to be like a Haradrim queen, and I think that would be cool. But if this is anything other than that, that's going to be weird. I've heard a lot of people talking about this being a Númenórean queen, and that's also really weird because the Númenóreans are all one ethnicity, and it'll be weird to have a multi-ethnic group in an island where they've all been living together for the last 1,000 years and intermarrying, and when they didn't start out as multi-ethnic. So again, this image, and we don't even know who this character is. They haven't told us yet. If this could be a Haradrim queen, this could be a Númenórean queen. We don't know who this is. But what's really bothering people is this, trying to make Tolkien's world look like modern day America. If you're setting a show in modern day America, yes, you should have a diverse cast because we have a diverse culture and we have diverse people. But if you're making a show about Scotland, it should reflect the people who live in Scotland, which are primarily white. Forcing diversity where diversity doesn't exist it's not good. It doesn't make it more moral or better quality. And again, they don't have to do it that way. They could have a diverse show without breaking the rules that Tolkien has kind of told us about his world. So those are my thoughts. Ultimately, let's wait till the show comes out. When it does come out, I'm planning to do an episode-by-episode review, so hang on till then. Be optimistic, but don't expect too much of this show. And hopefully we'll be able to enjoy it and find some good things from it.